is ambassador for 3 years, and just recently in 2019 was sworn in as the first female lieutenant governor and is our 50th lieutenant governor, which I think is just a great number and so impressive. So Eleni, we're so pleased to have you here. She's worked on so many different committees and has such a rich history and rich story. So can't wait to hear about your experience. So Eleni, are you there?
I am here, yes.
Great. So hi, Eleni. I think one of the first questions that everybody wants to know is, what is the role of lieutenant governor? I know that's a simple question, but
it's the question, Lisa, it's the question that everybody always wants to know, but not everybody wants to ask. So thank you for starting with that. But before I get into it, I just want to thank everyone for inviting me to be with all of you. Lisa and I have been friends for a very long time. We're just talking about a mutual friend from the early 90s, but was when I had my 2 children and we moved back we'd been in Sacramento for a while. We came back to San Francisco. My husband's from San Francisco. The boys were 1 and 2. This is back in 2003. And we needed a pediatrician. And someone said, well, just call Lisa. She's a pediatrician in San Francisco and she's the best one. Oh, so she is pretty much done the full job because my boys are pretty much all grown up now. But I'm so grateful for you to do this, Lisa, because I'm a relatively new member of the Yacht Club. I've, of course, been there many, many, many times over the years, but I was off serving in Hungary as an American ambassador. When I came back, I thought I would probably go back to Washington again in working in Hillary Clinton's administration if she had won. When I decided and was elected, soon after I thought, well, it's going to be, I'm going to be in the state a lot. I'm going to be home a lot. It would be wonderful to go join the Yacht Club. And so some friends sponsored us. And part of the reason I was so excited to do this is because it's really nice when you're down at the Yacht Club and you recognize people So it's a little hard to tell with these little squares, but I hope that everyone, if you ever see me, if I ever see you, say hello. It's really nice, especially after a year of being, so isolated for so many people. Okay, so what does the lieutenant governor do? The first and foremost, the lieutenant governor is a separate constitutional office from the governor. We don't run together. We're not elected together very often in history. They represent different parties. But in my case, I was elected in 2018 in what is called sort of the Year of the Woman. I had never run for office before, though I had served in government. And I decided, I heard that call from Hillary Clinton, who was a friend, saying women should run. And so I did it, and it was a wild experience. And now I've been serving in this position for about almost 2.5 years. So there are various responsibilities. One is that when the governor leaves the state, the lieutenant governor is the fallback, not surprisingly, but you can imagine that leaves a lot of time for other things. So depending on the state, the job is quite different, but in California, there are a couple of key elements. What you usually hear is, oh, the LG sits on a lot of boards and commissions. There are a couple key commissions and boards that I serve on. I am an ex officio member of all 3 of the institutions of public higher education. So University of California, CSU, and the Community College Board. I am the only person who sits on all 3. Many other elected officials, several other anyway, serve on the CSU and the UC. I'm the only one to serve on the Community College Board. We have about 3 million students enrolled in public higher education in the state of California right now. Raise your hand if you went to a CSU, a UC, or a community college at any point, right? Incredibly important part of our society. And I spent a lot of time working on public higher ed. I also work a lot in the environmental space. I am the chair of the State Lands Commission. State Lands oversees about 5 million acres of land in California. Most of it is submerged. You would be happy to know, in fact, all the way up to 3 miles off our coast. Any facilities that go from the sea into the shore are usually part of our purview. And of course, we deal with all kinds of things in overlapping jurisdiction with the Coastal Commission, for instance, which I also serve on, and the Ocean Protections Council as well. And then the third thing that I do that's a special portfolio that Gavin Newsom, Governor Newsom, and I have developed together is because of my experience in trade and investment and international affairs. He signed an executive order right after we were both elected, essentially giving me the international portfolio for the state. So some people call me California's top diplomat. I spend a lot of time working in this space. I'm preparing next week for a virtual visit of the Crown Prince of Norway. Not surprisingly, with Norway, we talk a lot about energy security. We talk a lot about environmental issues and climate change. But basically, what we have done is really develop priorities for the state of California in international affairs and trade. And I feel very fortunate that the governor has entrusted me essentially to work with his staff as sort of the team leader around international trade and investment. And then finally, again, specific to me, because I am the first woman ever elected to this position. As you can imagine, I spend a lot of time working in and around equity issues. And it goes beyond just being a female. I'm Greek American, but my father was an immigrant to the United States when he was just a teenager. He came alone with no money, spoke no English, and worked in the fields of California as a farm worker. He was given an opportunity through amazing public schools to go to Sacramento to get an education at Sacramento State. Didn't quite graduate. I was the first in my family to go off to college and graduate to a four-year university and graduate, and have had incredible opportunities in my life. And so really paying attention to the elements of the California dream are something that are very important to me. And obviously that really dovetails with equity, but also of course with opportunity and ensuring that our business climate is healthy and that opportunity exists and is accessible to Californians who work hard to build a better life for themselves and their families. So that is a little bit, not just about what the LG does, but what I do in this office.
So education, finance, the environment, and making everybody equitable. That's a lot. That's like, you've got to, that's impressive. You must, you're going to learn so much. You must be learning so much throughout this process. And when you talk about education, because that's clearly one of your things, one of the things we ask about is like, what choices did you make with education that helped you become the path or your path to leadership? Was it, so you mentioned business school at Berkeley, right? When you did that and now you're in a more of a public service role, how that kind of parlayed into each other, or how that decision has affected where you are right now?
Well, I was definitely a liberal arts kid. And in some ways it was remarkable that I ended up, I went to Dartmouth, and my older sister doesn't like me saying this, but it's helpful to just kind of understand the context. But she started a family when she was 19 years old. And in our immigrant community, that was not entirely uncommon. And I had teachers who encouraged me to go off to college. So education for me was an incredibly important pivot point. And I went off to college, not really knowing what I wanted to study, but really believed in this idea of the liberal arts education, which is why I ended up in New Hampshire and have the benefit of that kind of background, which has really been I've been able to apply to everything that I've done. But there's no question that education takes so many forms, and young people tend to vote with their feet. I mean, I think that the number, my older son is a freshman at Stanford, and it is remarkable the transition into computer science and the number of students who are pursuing STEM, which is great, but quite a different pathway, I think, from when I had my education. And I do think that balance is really important in that, and that our STEM students are learning some civics and government and reading literature, as well as getting those really very specific skills that will allow them to succeed.
And how important do you think is that secondary degree, is that degree after college is for women?
For women, I think for my generation, I think it's been enormously important, but it changes. When I was just starting out in my 20s, I remember meeting with a supervisor in Sacramento. I was in housing for 18 years in Sacramento. And she said, I don't know, Eleni, you know, and she was telling me that she went to school. They would not let her take courses in engineering. She was barred from taking courses in engineering because she was a woman. But she ended up going to law school, and she said, I don't know, you have an MBA, you don't have a law degree. I don't know how a woman can really make it without a law degree. You know, she was a generation ahead of me, you know, at least 20, 30 years older than me at the time. So I don't know that I necessarily would tell young women, you have to have it, because I don't know that I know well. But I do think that for young women who want to pursue it, making sure that it's as accessible as possible is really important, because as we know, education has become so much more expensive. When I went to Cal for my MBA, I spent, I think it was, I'm trying to remember, $6,500 a year, and it's $63,000 a year for that degree at Cal now. So it makes a very, very big difference. There are students who were enrolled who were ready to go into the nonprofit sector, and they wanted an MBA and they wanted to transition into nonprofits. I think that, you know, in social justice kind of things, I think that it's much harder for someone to look at the cost of that education and think, unless I want to go into finance or marketing or tech, how exactly do I justify paying for it? On the other hand, education is flattened as well. There's a lot more accessibility to online courses and that kind of training. So, you know, so I think there are different options, but I certainly never discourage anyone who wants to go as far as they have that drive to do in education.
And now you're in, and by the way, if you guys, any questions out there, you can certainly put them on chat, and Barbie Calendar is going to help us moderate that at the end. But when you're now a public servant, you know, you serve us, you're serving our people, your audience. And had you ever gone into, did you ever run for anything in high school? Did you ever think that this would be, did you go for student class president? Was this anything that you ever thought you would be doing?
So again, I grew up in this very vibrant immigrant community up in Sacramento. And the mantra of my childhood was how lucky I was to be born in America. And so the idea that that I could participate in my own governance, no matter who you are in this country, if you have good ideas, if you get out there and organize your fellow citizens around issues, you can change your own governance. That is not true and has not been true in the vast majority of countries throughout the history of the world. I always had one foot in service. I worked at the California Democratic Party right after I finished business school. I worked on the Clinton-Gore campaign, and then I went back into housing. So people always thought I might run, and they talked to me. Nancy Pelosi, who's here in town, you all I'm sure know her, our Congresswoman. She encouraged me quite a bit, but I was very tentative about it. It seemed very risky. You could lose. You could be humiliated. So that was the main reason why I decided to go to join the Obama administration to represent the United States as an American ambassador, which was the honor and the just thrill of my life. But it was kind of avoiding the idea that I might run myself. But again, as I mentioned, everything changed. Hillary is still a good friend and a mentor. And I was devastated by that. I just buried myself in fiction. I just read books, everything I could get my hands on, to try to sort out what this would mean for the country I love, for the world that I want to see stable and safe for our children and our families. And so I had thought about it, but always backed away until that moment when all of my fear melted away. And I often say it was the least thought through thing I have ever done in my life.
Really?
And it was a very long process. It was 19, 20 months long, that campaign. It's a long time. And I went to 58 counties. I visited every single county in the state of California. I sat down with people. I literally went around the state looking for people to talk to who would tell me their stories.
Wow. So you've heard a lot of wonderful stories, I'm sure. And when you were growing up in high school, college, what was your first job? Or did you have, what would you do? What do you remember as your first job?
Well, the first time I made any money, someone had delivered a half a cord of wood to our house and they left it in the wrong spot. So my father said, I'll give you $5 if you take this wheelbarrow and move all these logs and stack them over on the other side of the house. That's the first thing I remember. But I had several really important internships in politics. Again, I was living in Sacramento. My family and our community was very active. So I had an internship in the office of Nick Petras back in 1983, I think. And then in 1985, right before I went off to college, I went to Washington and I worked as an intern in the office of Bob Matsui. So those were kind of my first jobs were really in service. But my first paid job, some of you might know George Marcus. He's in the Peninsula. He's a good friend of mine, and I had gotten my MBA. So he hired me to work in housing for him. And as I said, I worked about 18 years altogether in housing.
Oh, that's great. And your ambassador experience, that must have just been amazing. And I've heard you go to ambassador school. Is this correct?
Yes, it is. And I wrote a book about it because people still to this day ask me about this experience. It was remarkable. I grew up, as I said, I grew up as a patriot, but the level of patriotism that I have for my country really deepened and developed with the knowledge and frankly, the practice of of working as a senior U.S. government official overseas, it was an experience that certainly changed me and shaped me, and continues to this day to remind me of the way that most of the world has always seen this country, certainly during the latter part of the 20th century, the can-do people, the optimists, the people who can, the democracy that can solve whatever problem comes our way, even if we go through fits and starts. And it helps me, Lisa, in my current role, remember that that we are, in spite of our mistakes, in spite of our shortcomings, still what my friend Madeleine Albright likes to say, the indispensable nation, or Ronald Reagan used to call the shining city on the hill. But now in my current job, I feel a responsibility to do whatever I can to ensure that we can continue to be that for people around the world, and that starts here at home.
So it was interesting. I was talking to a friend who had the fortune of being an ambassador, and his response was that it was really fascinating. It wasn't about party at all. It was all about being an American. And that was really what you're saying. Like you have this patriotism. It's about, you're representing your country. You're representing everybody.
Was it a recent ambassador, Lisa?
Barely recent. Yeah. So
Trevor?
I thought that was,
were you talking about Trevor?
It was just somebody else, but it was really fascinating to hear that it's about you're serving your country. It's just
no question about it. You take an oath of office to the United States, to the people of the United States, not to the president, not to the government, but to the people. And you feel that responsibility the minute you cross the borders. It can be when politics at home are so divisive as they have been, it can be challenging. But we have this incredible foreign service, people who are practiced in diplomacy, and hold on to the legacy of American diplomacy, and those values and those norms really are very powerful. And I think that your friend and so many of us have felt that.
Yeah. And a couple of things I wanted to ask you is also, you've got this great relationship with the Yacht Club, and then we'll go into our questions, but what's your relationship with the water? I know you're from Greece. There's a lot of water around you there. I know you've got some good boating stories.
I love the water. I love it. When I was in Hungary, one of the things I did, back when I could do this sort of thing, is I led a team along with the Ministry of Defense to swim 3 miles across the largest lake in Europe, Lake Balaton. So I love swimming. I have in my life had the opportunity to really spend a lot of time in boats. I used to, right around the time I met my husband, I was crew on a boat in the J105? Is that what? Yeah. For 2 seasons, I think I was out there, and I ran the spinnaker around. So not so technical in my sailing, but really, really enjoyed it. I do tend to get a little bit seasick in my older age. We have a boat we keep in Greece, and it's a rigid inflatable. I don't know if you know that, but it feels a little different. You don't get seasick, so I enjoy doing that. And when I can get out on the water, I really do enjoy doing. My husband, Marco's, absolutely passionate sailor.
Yep, that's so great. Good. Well, I've already seen some questions. Barbie, do you want to tackle the one from Kristen?
Sure. So from Kirsten Nusser, she asks, is Lieutenant Governor a 24/7 job?
Oh, I think of it that way because, at the highest level, if at any moment something happened to the governor, I do feel this responsibility to be prepared. So the governor and I have a very good relationship. He lets me talk to his senior staff whenever I want a briefing or to understand something better. So I do take that responsibility very seriously. But I also, very proud to be in this position. My family in Greece, my grandmother couldn't read, never went to school a single day in her life. And so I'm extremely honored and proud to be in service for this state that has been home, all my life. So I take it seriously, and I try to pack my schedule in order to be able to honor that service. And I get calls from student groups. We have 10 UCs, 23 CSUs, and 115 community colleges. And I get asked all the time, will you speak with this group? Will you speak with that group? And you can fill your calendar with those meetings. I certainly can't do all of them, but I take that responsibility seriously to be able to engage at every level. And then, of course, all of the preparation for the work that I outlined at the beginning of this certainly takes a long time. But I also think, and again, as women, I think it's always important that I do believe that if you really want to do a good job in whatever you do, you need to be healthy. So I'm on my Peloton a couple times a week. I walk down. That's my favorite walk, is down on Chrissy Field. So I'm down there all the time. And I think that we know that a happy life requires having positive and deep personal family and friend relationships. And so I really do try to focus on that as well, and strike that balance.
That's great.
That is great. Okay, thank you. Aaron Stipolkowski asks, what is your favorite part of your job as Lieutenant Governor?
If it were just a snippet, I love walking into the Capitol. It never gets old. I have this installation we put into my office of the previous 49 lieutenant governors, and they're all black and white photos. And then mine is in color, again, trying to demarcate the historic change in electing a woman to this position. But I think that if I really were to say my favorite part, my career in international relations and foreign policy that started for me now almost 12 years ago is really important to me. And so I spent a lot of time talking about national security issues, border issues. We have a significant U.S. military footprint in the state of California. I work regularly with our diplomatic corps, engaging. The governor just doesn't have a lot of time to do those kinds of bilateral meetings. But our state, it's estimated that about 1 in 5 of California jobs come from international trade and investment. And that's both tourism and travel, but it also includes our export market. We're #1 in California in manufacturing. We're #1 in two-way trade. We have the largest port in North America in LA and Long Beach. I always talk about the port of Hueneme, which is down in Southern California. Most people up here have never even heard of Hueneme, and yet every year 3.3 billion bananas come through that port. That's 10 bananas for every man, woman, and child in the United States. So that the trade, foreign trade, international trade and investment sector, foreign direct investment, tourism, all of these things are very important to the economy of our state, but it's also really a labor of love to be able to continue to work in the international space and also around national security.
that kind of going on with that is Miles Ashelman asks, what's the biggest challenge of your current role?
Hello, Miles. And let's just hats off to the male allies of the women of the St. Francis Yacht Club. The biggest challenge, was that your question?
Yes.
I think the biggest challenge for me as someone who's comes out of the business background is I'm very accustomed to being able to draw a circle around a problem and put all of my energy and resources into resolving it. Many of the challenges that we have in our state are not immediately resolvable. And it's hard for me because, there is a difference between kicking the can down the road and creating the kinds of institutional reforms and change that will eventually get us where to go. And so what I have to do is try to focus on the latter, even if it isn't what the kind of problem solving that I was accustomed to in my business career. That's probably the hardest thing for me. And I guess it would boil down to just like losing patience. But I really try hard not to, because there are certain realities of the way that government engages. And by the way, that doesn't mean that we don't have successes along the way. And I can point to several of them, but one that just kind of immediately jumps to mind. We used to have an enormous amount of remedial education going on in our community college system. And this happened before my time. A couple of years ago, the legislature, in recognizing that too many students were going to community colleges using up whatever student aid that they could get, and they weren't getting any credits because it was remedial. They were being forced into remedial education courses. And so the legislature stepped in and passed a bill saying any student that wanted to take a course for credit could not be denied. And almost overnight, students voted with their feet. They signed up for course credit classes. And now they went from this deficit of students actually getting course credits for their classes, their courses at community colleges, to now the vast majority of them getting course credit. So we can point to these bright spots and ways that, in fact, we can find the kinds of immediate or at least abbreviated, I mean, that process alone took a couple of years, but the kinds of changes that will yield immediate results to the benefit of our students and our people.
So not completely related to that, but one question that did come in, and that was, who you would say your earliest mentor is?
I had a librarian at my school who gave me books and kind of saw something in me, and it meant a lot to me that she saw potential. But certainly the most impactful is Nancy Pelosi. She has been a mentor, but also what we call a sponsor. She was the one who really pushed for me to be given the opportunity to serve in the Obama administration as I did. And she's also just for me, a transformative figure. I know that there are a lot of ways that she's personified and projected in the media, but she is a truly remarkable person. I think history will show that over time when the books are written about her and her leadership. But she is a woman of deep faith, and she is driven by service in a way that has really been very influential to me in my life. But there are many others. just here in San Francisco, Richard Blum, who's Dianne Feinstein's husband. Dianne has been influential in my life, but Richard has actually been a real mentor and someone who got me involved in some really exciting and interesting things when I was in the private sector. And then Kamala Harris, she and I are friends, and I think in a way have mentored each other, if I could be so bold as to claim that kind of a role. But we are peers and friends, and given each other so much support over the years. But along the way, my family, my sisters, I have 4 sisters. There are 5 of us. And so many women and men as well.
So I just love when you said your first one was a librarian, because for me, I had a 4th grade librarian. And I was curious, what grade was that librarian? How old were you? Do you remember?
I was a little older. It was middle school.
Middle school. That's great. Well, because I always tell kids all the time, you just have to keep reading books. If you read books, the world opens up. You'll have so many more options. And that's true for any degree you want, whether it's science or math or liberal arts like you. And you've been so fortunate to have these incredible people here in San Francisco and in the Bay Area. I think we're blessed to have all of these powerhouses and rock stars right here amongst us. And I don't think it's too much to say that you are a co-mentor to Kamala, because I think that's very appropriate, very appropriate. And I guess as we're wrapping up here, just because I like to, end on a really good note, and what some advice you would give to young people and old people, because I think we can all reinvent ourselves at any time. But if you wanted to go to a life of public service or just follow your dream, what is one thing that you would say, this is what you need to do?
You know what? I was telling Barbie and the others earlier today, I did a conversation with a guy I went to business school with named Scott Galloway. And he just wrote this book called The Algebra of Happiness. Actually, this came out, he's written, I think, 2 books since. I'm not sure when this one came out, but boy, it's great. And he's a UC grad, double UC grad. And I think that it's really underrated, this idea that happiness is something that we pursue. But it's in the Declaration of Independence, right at the top of the purpose of the founding of the country, to allow our people the freedom to pursue happiness. It's not a promise that the country makes that it will deliver happiness, but the ability to pursue it. And so I think with a year of lockdown behind us, books like Scott's, and this is a particularly good one because he really breaks it down almost scientifically, but he also builds on the great philosophers, the great religions, the great thinkers of world history, and just some of the basic building blocks of what it is to have a life of happiness, fulfillment in a life of purpose, investment in your personal relationships with your family and your friends. And I think something that Nancy always says, which is to be part of something bigger than just yourself. And I think that advice is good for all ages, because we can forget sometime, we can slip into our own worlds and our immediate challenges and forget the fulfillment that comes with a sense of purpose and a sense of community and that involvement in any kind of way that you can be part of something bigger than just yourself. And frankly, being part of the women's group of the St. Francis Yacht Club, and organizing ways to bring people together, to share ideas, to deepen relationships, and to do that extraordinary, engage in that extraordinary activity of working together to keep a boat afloat and go to a point on the horizon that you agree together is your North Star, so to speak.
Well, thank you so much. I've got to say, I've learned so much about you. I've always known that you're an incredible leader and a servant, really. You serve us. And I really say thank you, because I don't think that we acknowledge enough that all these leaders are actually working very hard, not getting paid enough, and working for us, and really doing this because they feel that. And I'm glad it brings you happiness, because thank you. It's a hard role to fill. You're an author. I definitely want you to share your book with us, because I think we all should read it. I'm definitely going to put down the Algebra of Happiness. An ambassador, which I think once you're an ambassador, you're always one. You're always going to be the ambassador for our country, no matter where you go. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I can't wait to see you. I love to see you at Sunday night dinners, which is, I think, one of your places where you ground yourself with your family. And I think that really, it means a lot, because I think the Yacht Club has become a place where we can kind of quiet the outside world a little bit and enjoy just everybody who's right in front of us.
Well, Lisa, my friend, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for having me. Again, it's a little hard. I can recognize, I think I'll recognize some of you walking around the Yacht Club, but please, if you recognize me, please say hello.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Eleni. It was Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis. Woo!
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Kelly.
Bye, thanks.